All right, getting ready here. Do I got a green screen? Let's see.
Wow.
Let's see here. Hang on. Hello, hello. Looking to see if I can find the right background here. Pulling me up here. Ba-dum, ba-dum. See if we got anything else we can pull up here. All right. Let's see what we got here. Yeah. All right. Hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. Cat King here. Just wanted to pop on. It's Friday night. This is my first real live I've done in a while. I just wanted to introduce myself. I am a disabled veteran who, for the better half of my adult life, I've pretty much been dealing with treatment-resistant schizophrenia, complex PTSD, and ADHD. So I thought it would be really helpful to get on here because it's just you get a lot of advice about what to do and about like how to approach talking about your story, and it's not easy to come out here and just put my face randomly out here on the internet and say, hey, I'm one of these people with schizophrenia and I need help and I need people to hear what we're saying because I've been sitting on the sidelines the last 15 years watching all these movies and TV shows get made about people who hear voices and see things and the industry makes all this money off of us, and yet there are so many people who are still struggling. So I thought it'd be really important to talk about I wanted to know what are the most important questions that people have about schizophrenia. What do you want to know? Because there are 120,000 veterans with schizophrenia in the United States right now, and I happen to be one of them. And that's less than a percentage. That's like less than half of a percentage, of the entire veteran population in our country struggles with schizophrenia, and we are the ones who end up on the streets. Now, I've been homeless at different points in my life and at different like sort of degrees of that. Like I wouldn't say that obviously I'm not homeless now, but I'm currently, trying to take care of, trying to find a job, find out where I fit in this world and belong. And so I thought it'd be really helpful to come into the space as somebody who is a veteran with schizophrenia who could speak to what it's been like going in and out of the hospital systems of the last 15 years and what it's like to experience trauma associated with the military, but also outside of the military experience and what that's been like. And it's not easy to talk about. I can't really talk too much detail about the military because I was in the military at a time when there were things going on. I was a linguist in the military. My job was primarily to interpret and translate French, and so that was primarily my job. And hello, hello, welcome. I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for joining me. My name is Kat King, and I am obviously I'm a creator here, but I'm fairly new to this space because I hadn't heard anybody talking about like what I've been through. I hadn't seen or heard anybody telling the story about being a veteran with schizophrenia, and that's primarily because most people that I know of who are veterans with schizophrenia really struggle really quite badly. And thank you. Yes, That's what I'm here for. I'm here to share my story and connect with folks who may know somebody who hears voices and may need help, or somebody who they they love and they're struggling and they want to understand them better. And it's like, well, it's one of those things where you have to understand that having schizophrenia is not something that I did to myself. It's something that happened to me, much like MS or Parkinson's or cancer. It's not something that I brought on myself through just drug use. And I know that there's a lot of conversation around, well, there is drug-induced psychosis. But drug-induced psychosis has to do with a temporary state of mind, whereas schizophrenia is an ongoing state of constantly hearing voices or seeing things that other people aren't seeing. And that can vary from person to person. There are people with schizophrenia who don't see or hear voices or see things. So it just kind of depends on how the person is experiencing the illness. Now, I just read a really disturbing statistic that says that 9 out of 10 people who have schizophrenia, they have we have a history of childhood trauma. So that's true for me for sure. And I'm sad to say that like I'm the statistic, but it's true. And so when we get into the nitty gritty of like myths about schizophrenia, everybody on YouTube who advocates about schizophrenia is going to tell you that by and large, people with schizophrenia are not dangerous, not more dangerous, not categorically and automatically more dangerous because of their schizophrenia. Usually when we see cases of violence, it has to do with an overlapping lack of treatment, lack of supports, lack of medications, but also there's also substance abuse that's going on too. And so a lot of these people are using substances like alcohol, especially to cope. I am one of them. I used alcohol definitely to cope. Alcohol was part of my childhood growing up, not my early childhood. And that's why we're talking about like being that weird little homeschool kid. I was homeschooled. And alcohol wasn't like really part of my early childhood, but then as I got older, I saw more and more of that in my house, and it caused a lot of chaos. And I wasn't really used to that because when you're homeschooled, especially I come from like a nuclear Christian family. And as I got older, I started to realize that my parents like weren't really who I thought they were, and they had whole lives and other children and things like that that I didn't know about, and a whole past, and you unblock that and you as you get older because no one wants to talk about it, and that's when we get into generational trauma. So yes, my family, I had a complex PTSD. I already had PTSD before I joined the army, but it was undiagnosed. I was one of those people who ended up, it was just like I was homeschooled, and then I planned my life out, and my plan was join the army, get a degree, join the FBI, be the next Dana Scully, or, my biggest influence in TV in the 90s, I'm 35. So I grew up with like Voyager, Star Trek, Janeway, Dana Scully, and I grew up with these power women, even like Xena. I didn't really watch Xena, but she was out there, and I wasn't into that. I was into science and sci-fi, and so I wanted to join the army. I don't know what I thought I was doing. I guess I was really confused about things about the world because I was homeschooled and my parents raised me on Star Trek. It's no worries. It's something that, you do because I felt like very strongly that I was serving a community, and I was willing to lay down my life for anybody who called themselves an American citizen, or even really honestly anybody who was trying to help people in the world. And I didn't really understand really what the military does in the world because I was, like I said, being homeschooled. I watched Star Trek. That was pretty much it. We watched Star Trek. We watched Schoolhouse Rock. I watched musicals primarily growing up. I remember that there wasn't really any early drug use, is what I'm trying to explain. Like that, I didn't use drugs. That's what I'm trying to say. I had schizophrenia when I was 22. So I hadn't started any drugs. I was in the military, just got out of the military. I ran away to Australia. I fell in love with an Australian woman in the Star Trek community, and I fell in love with her, and I went down to Australia, and then she told me she couldn't be with a woman, and I had a psychotic break, and I tried to kill myself. When I came back, I was still in the military, and I went to hospital, and they told me like, hey, look, maybe being in the military environment's not the best for you. And so I was like, yeah, you're probably right. So I moved to Australia to be with her, and she basically was like, nope, sorry, I can't be with a woman. And so I was like, okay, fine. So I'll stay in Australia and I'll just do my thing. And then I found out I was on the wrong visa and I didn't have any legal working rights. And so I had to quit my job, and I couldn't find another job legally. So it was just a big, long rigmarole, but I ended up being stranded in New Zealand, and I ended up having to be shipped back to the United States. And when I came back, I got a job, and I tried to work back my passport so I could get the opportunity to travel again, which I did. And I did all of those things, but when I came back from that experience is when I had the first real major breaks where I was fuging, like what you call a fugue state. I was dissociating. I saw myself from the other side of the room, and I watched myself go out to the street, and I was hearing this woman's voice, and she speaks French. My language is French in the military, and I used it in the military context. And so I went out to the street and this woman was talking to me and I realized who it was. And I was like, oh, it's Edwige Fayère, it's Lafayette. And I was like, I know this woman. And I thought she was my guardian angel. I thought she had come through. I didn't fight for Israel. I wasn't in that part of the world. I went to Africa, unfortunately, for the army. So didn't fight for Israel, didn't fight for anybody. So that would be inaccurate. And so I just want to clear the air on that, because if anybody's like wondering about like what American soldiers do, we don't just go to the Middle East. We go to all around the world, and primarily what we're told is that we're peacekeeping. We are told that what we are doing is keeping the peace in unstable regions of the world where we're worried about terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda, those groups like that. But that's what I never stepped foot in the Middle East, not once as a soldier in the United States Army. That doesn't mean that there aren't people who are doing that, but I just wasn't what I was doing. So it's important to like understand that the United States military has operations all around the world, and that at any given time there are things happening that I can't really speak to, because even I was told when I left the military, like whether you ever wear the uniform again and you ever step foot into the army, you're still going to represent the military. And the military, when we swear that oath, when we take that oath, it's to the Constitution. It's to the values of the Constitution, it's to the Army values, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's never to one person. It's not to your commanding officer. It's not even to the commanding officer of the armed forces. It's to the Constitution. So any action, any order that is unconstitutional is considered illegal, unlawful, and cannot be carried out. Well, when you're in the military, it's really hard to put your foot down when you're like a low-ranking nothing private. What are you going to say? But I always say, if you look back to the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, there was one soldier, one tiny little guy who stood up and said, no, enough. And this has to stop. But a little too late. And I don't even think that the commanding officer of the unit was ever really totally punished for what happened, because everybody said, well, PTSD, basically it's like they didn't call it PTSD, it was like shell shock. They said that these guys, the fog of war is a common phrase that you hear, is that the fog of war. Well, yeah, that could be true. I think especially for my great grandfather who fought at the Battle of Ardennes, at the Battle of the Bulge in World War II, I never heard exactly what he went through specifically, but I know that it was awful, because I'd always read that the Battle of the Bulge was one of the fiercest battles in the entire conflict, because it was Hitler's last stand against the Allied forces trying to make it to Antwerp. And if they could create that bulge in the Allied force line and break that line, that they could get through to Antwerp, and that would be it. Hitler could continue. And, he wasn't going to go down. It was down to the last man. So and in terms of like ADHD, so I was diagnosed with 4 years ago with ADHD. I guess the confusion was always like, is the schizophrenia what's distracting you? And I was like, well, if you report my history before I ever had schizophrenia, prior to age 22, and you talk to my friends, my family members, people who knew me, they would all say that I always had a habit of like tripping over my words. I always had so much going on, so much energy. I had a very vivid imagination, and I was such a ham, but I had a really bad habit of like interrupting people and being very impulsive. So my therapist was like, well, I'm going to go ahead and I just need to do some assessments to see, because you do have a habit of having very high pressured speech. Like you always seem like you have to get a lot out very quickly. So for ADHD, for me, I don't have any medication for the ADHD side of things. In fact, I don't really have anything right now for anything that I have currently. I'd like to. I'm in the process of getting a new therapist and like talking to a new psychiatrist, because I don't think my psychiatrist accepts Medicaid, and I have to be on Medicaid right now, at least until I start my new job. So, most of us, like, we're not trying to be a waste or a fraud or abuse in the system. We're actually doing everything we can to function as like quote unquote normal people in the world, and we do everything we can to like mask for everybody else, so that you don't think that I'm some strange person talking to the air. I don't want people to think that way about me. But you have to also remember that I've had this illness for over half of my adult life now. I started 22 and now I'm 35, and so I've been living with it this whole time. And so for me, it's not about I don't support I absolutely do not support the things that are going on right now in Gaza. I absolutely abhor carpet bombing civilians and collective punishment. That goes against all of the Geneva Conventions. So no, I do not support what's happening in Gaza. I do not support the Israeli government or Benjamin Netanyahu, and I never will. Um, and I think that, but I am Jewish. Like, I'm of a Jewish heritage. Like, my family left Europe, and if they hadn't, I would have been killed in the Holocaust for sure. So I say that as somebody of Jewish ancestry and Ashkenazi Jewish heritage, especially, I don't think that we have any real true national birthright to Israel. We were given, I was understood, raised to believe that we were given a gift of land to live on after World War II to like apologize for being exterminated by the Nazis. And there was some agreement, some peace accord that was made. That was what I was led to believe growing up. And if that's not true, then that's not true. And obviously, it doesn't excuse murdering 40,000 women and children in the name of trying to get justice for the 1,000 people who were killed in Israel. There's something, and the military teaches us something called a measured response. And it's, if 1,000 people got killed, then you would come back, you would get those 1,000 soldiers, you would bring them back, you would try them by tribunal, military justice, and then they would be, I guess I would be tried and executed under military code of justice. But yeah, the whole idea is like you can't just go in and like massacre an entire country's worth of people just to get at a few people who are causing the trouble. And it's like, okay, we understand, but we're going to do it anyway. Well, as a person in the military, like right now, if I'm going down, if I'm in the 101st Airborne Division, remember, I was in the military, I was in the U.S. Army, but I was in the intelligence branch of the military. So my job was as an interpreter and translator, primarily to listen to conversations in French and then to gather that information in the language and then decode it and then gist it and all of that and make sure that we had the information that was necessary to go out on the mission, to talk to the source, to get the right people so that we could find the quote unquote bad guy. And the thing is, the word bad guy, the word enemy is such an amorphous word and it can change at a moment's notice. And from one minute we're fighting against people, and then from another side we're just CCBs. Yeah, my brother was I don't know if he was CB, but he was definitely he was on a Triton class submarine, and then somebody didn't I guess oil down the the rungs of the ladder as he was going up on the from down below deck, and he slipped and he messed up his back. So anything can happen to you when you're in the military, CONUS, like stateside. So, and that's kind of what happened to me. Like a lot of things happened to me when I was in the military that before I ever even had set foot anywhere else. So it's just, there's a history of growing up in this very shelter. Excuse me, I'm trying to eat my dinner. I forgot to finish eating before I got on here. There's something, about coming from a very sheltered existence where you only see the world through this particular very limited lens, and you think the world is a certain way. Well, like I said, growing up with Star Trek, I didn't know what money was. I didn't understand the acquisition of wealth because Star Trek, literally, that's almost the only thing I ever really watched, aside from like musicals. So to me, I grew up in this really rosy world where like people aren't looking to try to screw each other over to get their hands on a pile of paper. I mean, and the thing is, I could never quite wrap my mind around this idea of you took this thing that actually does sustain life, you destroyed it, you turned it into something, and then you devalued that thing, and then you turned it against something and pitted it against something that was just literally shinier, that has a practical use, but actually still doesn't actually really matter and doesn't accomplish anything in the world. And instead of bartering for services, goods, and things like that, working together in like co-op environments. Well, I grew up in a co-op as a homeschooled kiddo. Like my family were, all my godmothers were all very, everybody grew their own vegetables and fruit and things like that. And we took care of each other. And so I didn't spend a lot of time out in the world. So when I went to Walmart, my earliest core memories is going to Walmart with my parents and my sister and walking through the arts and crafts sections past like those silk flowers, those fake flowers. And my older sister starts stuffing like the flowers in my jacket. And I'm just like, I don't know what's going on. Okay, cool, whatever, flowers, yay, flowers. I did not understand that we were stealing. I didn't know what stealing was. I did not know what money was. And I didn't understand this even through elementary and middle school when my parents split up and I was forced by the court to go to public school. I didn't understand sarcasm. teasing, roasting each other. The boys, all, I grew up in like at the turn of the century, when everybody, all the boys were all into the wrestling stuff, and it was all the boys were all walking around saying "suck it." I'd never seen anything like that. I'd never heard the word. I mean, they were use the word faggot, and and my teacher actually made the boys stand up and get the dictionary out and look up the word in the dictionary. It's a bundle of sticks tied together with string. And she's like, yeah, well, now you know how to use that word properly next time. And I was like, well, cool. I didn't know. She was a very gruff lady. My mom had been my teacher my whole life. My mom had been my Girl Scout leader. My mom had been everything to me. So when my parents split up in a Christian home, a divorce is quite traumatizing, especially when you've had quote unquote ideal upbringing, and you had the nuclear Christian family, and we had a decent home, and my dad worked a lot, but he came home to tuck us in at night, and we watched Star Trek Voyager every night, Wednesday nights at 8 on UPN, and that was my life until suddenly like somebody set up a bomb off on it, and just from that point on, we were homeless. My mom got into a relationship with somebody who turned out to be a pedophile and a child molester, and like my sense of safety just completely shattered, and I spent all my life in Star Trek, and I stopped seeing the world completely at all. And so I don't know. I mean, I was always sort of maladaptive daydreaming. I was always taking things apart and putting them back together, trying to make. My mom wouldn't buy me Star Trek toys because she didn't think it was a healthy obsession. She thought I had a natural obsession with Janeway, and that was starting from when I was like 5 years old. So when you talk about schizophrenia, it's like 9 out of 10 people with schizophrenia have a history of childhood trauma. And when we talk about childhood trauma, we talk about everything from divorce to abandonment, emotional abandonment, to psychological abandonment from a mother to their child for that attachment. I went from a relationship where my mom held me and was my closest like warmth in life, or I was like, I often describe to my friends about that fond memory I have of waking up to the smell of chocolate chip pancakes on my birthday and missing that because we never had that. We just never had that again. We just never had that. We never had Christmases again. Talking about like spanking versus abuse, spanking versus being beaten. And I had tried to figure out that there were a couple of these different incidents in my life that my father, like my father used to spank us, but like he would cry. And then there was one day where my father came down the stairs. My sister and I are actually getting along, where we were reading the back of a cereal box, and my dad came downstairs and just shook us off the chair. And my dad had never like actually really like been so like violent toward me in that way, and I was really scared of him. And my mom came in from like a walk from up the street and was like, what's going on? And this was the watershed because it was the first time I ever seen my parents really fighting or arguing in a Christian home. Like it was just not. We were like always listening to Keith Green and Sandy Patty and Point of Grace and even the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, which we were not allowed to play. Oh, this is a story that I want to tell you about this story about not being allowed to play with the Mormon kids up the street. My parents are like Pentecostal and like evangelical Christians, and they don't agree with Mormonism and or the LDS Church at all. And my father personally believes that it's a cult and everything. And so when I was a child growing up, I was warned not to play with the Mormon girls up the street, and do not play with those kids. You're not allowed to play with the Mormon girls. So I was like, okay, whatever. I didn't know what that meant. What even is Mormon? I Christian, right? That's all I ever knew, Christians. And or of the devil. So there was one day, well, I was really lonely, and my sister, it was early in the morning, and it was too early for anybody to get up and play, but I heard some laughter from outside the window, and I went outside, snuck outside, pretended like I was looking for the cat. The cat got out, and my sister was like, yeah, I called bullshit on that. And I guess she told my mom, because I went up the street just 2 doors down to hang out with these little girls, and my mom came up, and I remember the feeling of the cold. I just remember the feeling of the cold, like the washing machine. I was sitting on top of it, and just everything went like totally dead inside of me when I saw my mom's eyes. And I was like, what is going on? And the irony in all of this is that I'm engaged to somebody who's ex-Mormon. So it's like the way that life works out and the way that things come sort of full circle, like the ultimate rebellion was that I would end up with a Mormon girl. But yeah, obviously she's not part of the Mormon church anymore, but, and being gay, like it's really difficult to be a part of the Mormon church if you're gay, especially right now, things are getting kind of crazy because of the political climate. But at the end of the day, like it's worth mentioning that not all of us homeschooled kids come from like the Turpin family situation, but at the same time, there were deficits. There were things that I didn't have and didn't have access to as a homeschooled child. But I did have socialization. I did have friends. We had friends in our community that we played with. We had park days, and we had oh yeah, yeah, pot smoking Mormon from Ventura County. Right on, brother. Right on, Richard. That's awesome to hear. It's quite a trip. We've been watching the Mormon Stories podcast. We've been watching the Alyssa Grenfell and all of these ex-Mormon folks coming out of the church and talking about their experiences. But it's been quite a wild trip watching her family kind of sort of edge away and ebb and flow in and out of the church over the last few years. Yeah, for sure. I agree. I mean, I'm never going to be a person who says we should never believe in anything at all. I'm not a complete and total atheist whatsoever. I'm more of, I guess, an agnostic or more of like a pantheist. I do believe there are truths and everything, but I think for me it was just I knew things were wrong because my uncle had schizophrenia. Like when I came out of the military and I wasn't adjusting and I wasn't doing well, I started hearing voices and everybody's just like, okay, this is just PTSD. Like we could do this, we can handle this. This is doable. You can recover easily. But we knew that my uncle had schizophrenia pretty badly, but he functioned. I mean, I remember growing up, I was always the one who to go fetch Uncle Bill for Thanksgiving dinner or for Easter dinner or whatnot. And Uncle Bill was always like, he talked to you. He was always talking to somebody else too. Like he just seemed to have somebody with him all the time. And nobody ever said what this was. They never used the word schizophrenia, but they did say, yeah, Uncle Bill talks to himself. And I'm like, oh, okay. But he was never unkind or mean to me, so I thought no problem. But I was a little nervous always having to go retrieve him because I just didn't know quite what to expect. And then, after he passed away, finally it was like people started saying like the word schizophrenia, but I don't know. My sister had this notion that he was just this really depressed person. But I don't know. It's pretty obvious to me when you're sitting at the table and you're having this whole conversation with somebody else and it never stops. That's pretty much like that's schizophrenia. And that's how we figured out that I had schizophrenia was because the voices never stopped. They just didn't go away. And then the guy across the street, like there's this guy standing underneath the street light across the street in front of the church at my house and calling out to me, telling me he's gonna rape me with a knife, like, and then that stayed with me. That this guy's threatening me and he's telling me these awful things. Now, I had been assaulted. By this point, I'd already had experienced assault, so I thought, oh, maybe I'm just having PTSD episodes. So we just didn't know. But when people started calling the police for me because I was freaking out, this guy was coming to attack me. And then they didn't see this guy, and they waited around. My ex waited around with me to see if he showed up, but I was like, he's right there. Can't you see him? I described him to her, and she's like, there's nobody there. And so I'm like, okay, well, then I guess I'm going to have to go to the hospital. So I checked myself in. I lived in Riverside, California at the time, and I had there was like an emergency treatment services facility at this place at County Farm Road. If you're from California, from Southern California, Riverside in particular, around this time in like 2012 or so, I had to go in to just see what was going on with me. And they had this emergency treatment facility. You could go in, check in. It was like around Christmas. And I had just finished reading this book and I was like, okay, I read this book and I need to figure out what's going on. Maybe they can help me. So I went to County Farm Road and I checked myself in, and they kept me for, I want to say 2 weeks just to observe me. And this was at the time when it was what we call prodromal. So I was in the pre-stages of schizophrenia, and I was talking very strangely. I wasn't communicating, just my language wasn't coherent and I wasn't making much sense. And I kept rhyming and saying silly things that just didn't seem to connect with what was happening around me. So they, at the end of the 2 weeks, they came back and said, like, look, so thanks for checking yourself in. We're glad that you did that to get yourself some help. And thanks. And you have schizophrenia. And I hope that you accept this. And I was like, are you sure it's like not just like PTSD? And I'm just having a really bad, like really break that's lasting longer, because I just feel like constantly being followed. There's somebody always behind my right ear to this day, one of the most long-standing auditory hallucinations that I always have, no matter what is going on, is this fucking thing that sits right behind my ear. And I'm starting to understand and appreciate Vincent van Gogh, because it's just like I want to just tear it out. And that leads to self-harm. And so there's schizophrenia is like you're perceiving the world in a way that other people aren't. You're seeing things, hearing things, smelling things, touching things, and sensing things that other people around you don't see, hear, touch, taste, or smell. And that can be very confusing, because even if you don't have schizophrenia, like I remember my life before I had this illness, but I can't recall the memories without the voices attached to them now. So like we were talking about trauma-informed therapy, and I'd gone through a lot of trauma-informed therapy over the years, but I hadn't been able to get consistent therapy because I kept losing my job or kept something happening and I couldn't keep my insurance. And so I'd end up back on Medicaid, and then I'd be waiting around. And when you're on Medicaid, you can only see a psychiatrist once every several months. And if that psychiatrist calls out, or if you miss it, then you're going to be stuck not being able to get your medication for another 3 months or so. So, and now you can't just go to the ER. They'll just kick you back to your primary care. So it's just like, I've been in so many ERs. I've been hospitalized 4 or 5 times now for suicidal ideations or attempts. I was 5150 in 2021 because I tried to slip my wrist open during a psychotic break. And that was the closest I'd ever actually come to actually harming myself. But thankfully there was somebody there to intervene. And the truth is about this is that like violence in schizophrenia is fairly rare, but it is important to be very honest and accurate about schizophrenia. And that is to say that people with schizophrenia are 14 times more likely to be victims of violence than to be perpetrators of it. Now, that's not to say that aren't people with schizophrenia who are never violent. There are, and have been and can be. I have been violent before, but those episodes of violence, there was alcohol, and I had been blacked out, so I didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't really realize that I was using alcohol to really cope and to escape from my voices. And so the problem is that I had to get a hold of that. I had to stop drinking alcohol to get a hold of myself and to be able to say, hey, at least I can do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding. I can do a box breathing. I can do something else to give myself a sense of reality so that I don't hurt other people. Or I don't think that I'm being hurt. Because in those instances, I believed that somebody was trying to hurt me. I saw somebody coming at me, somebody coming toward me. With a military background, having been and also having experienced sexual assault, where I was attacked from behind, and 3 different occasions I was assaulted by men. It happened on each occasion from behind, and so I'm very jumpy. And even though over 15 years later, I don't necessarily jump at every little noise anymore. I'm not as hyper responsive physically outwardly. Inside of me, I definitely am experiencing a trauma response and a trigger when people come up behind me. So I still have that problem, and I still need to help with that. So I'm hoping that now I'm on Medicaid. So I just was like, fuck this. I'm going to the ER. I'm going to get help. They're going to help me. Fuck this. My knees are shot from the army. I need to have my knees reevaluated again for an upgrade from my disability claim. But in the meantime, I was like, let's go to the ER and see if anybody will even look at this and scan my knees. And while we're here, at least I'll know whether or not I can get Medicaid. And then she came back within a few minutes and was like, yep, you're approved, because I wasn't working and I needed help. And everybody says, if you're in crisis, go to the emergency room. But you go to the emergency room and people don't treat you. They leave you in the corner in a piss-stained chair for 18 or 20 hours with barely any food. They treat you like you're a burden. They tell the whole world that they wish people would stop coming into the ER for help because they're burned out. And of course I have a job. I've been a teacher my whole life. I've been working on and off my whole life. If you look at my Social Security earnings statement, I've been working since I was 16 years old. So I was in the military. And so anybody who tells me to get a job, I am working. I do work. I actually work for the Space Needle. My every check that I came into from the Space Needle was 95 hours, and I worked every holiday. And I was on medication that gave me side effects that caused me to have almost like a seizure-like event. So that would happen to me at work. Well, you can only take so many days off of work before people are like, hey, look, you can't miss so much work. And well, I'm on medication for this other condition that if I don't stay on that medication for that condition, I can't work at all. So I don't want to hear about don't get a job or you need to lose weight. I've lost plenty of weight. I do everything all of the right things for myself to take care of myself. I eat primarily pretty much a plant-based diet, pretty much out there all the time, walking the property every night. and doing the right things and taking care of myself by eating good food that's fresh. But I go to the food bank to get food because I can't afford food right now. I've been underemployed the last couple of months. And that's primarily because if you think about it, I live in Seattle, and Seattle has got one of the highest cost of living here in the United States. And we are working at this iconic building, the Space Needle in, Seattle. And you would think, oh, this is the most iconic building. They make so much money hand over fist. They make millions of dollars every year off of the tourism industry. And you'd think they would be able to afford your graveyard safety officers who make sure that the drunks are escorted off the property safely and they're not hurting anybody, that make sure that people who are trespassing on the property are escorted off. And we are the ones who put our bodies on the line. And I've been working at that job for the last year and a half. And now I'm a teacher, so I'm going back to the teaching world, and I need to get my credentials swapped over. So like I said, I've literally been working. There's only 1 year that I didn't work on my taxes, and that was 1 year in 2012 when I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Paranoid schizophrenia, which is a result of trauma from childhood and mixture of military service and sexual assaults and being exposed to homelessness and domestic violence for years and years and years. So I'm still working. I still provide. I am the primary breadwinner for my family right now. And I don't have a problem with being the primary breadwinner. It makes me feel good that I can take care of my family. But I'm not always successful. And that means that it's important to make sure that there are supports in place for folks like me. There are 127,000 military veterans in the United States who suffer from schizophrenia, and I'm one of them. And that's something that happened to me because of trauma. I'm not sure what you're talking about, body on the line, you're a border. So you got to make sense. If you're gonna like come at me and drop hate and say shit that like you don't think that I'm gonna have a response to that, well, of course I have a response. That you don't know me. You're out here randomly. You're spending the time, giving the engagement, putting the comment there, and I'm gonna respond by saying you don't know that I've worked since I was 16. You don't know that I've worked consistently and provided for my family consistently on and off my whole life. So when you talk about the wall and everything like that, it's like, what are you talking about? I didn't work on the wall. I was in the military, I was in the army in 2007. So I wasn't part of any wall or border operations at all. I was in the military for French language, and I served missions that have nothing to do with any of that. So I don't know what you're talking about. But if you're going to come on here and you're going to say stuff, like make at least a complete sentence and say something that's of value and worth my time. Because I'm out here putting myself at risk, telling the whole world my life story so that other people don't have to go through this, so that you understand that we're real people out here, just living life, just trying to pay our bills, taking care of our family, going to work every day, while hearing voices telling me to kill myself, while seeing dead bodies and decapitated heads and body parts and blood and fascia, but while watching people with their fish eyes and their warped faces and their gaping holes where a face should be. I mean, that's been 15 years of going through CBT with a trained therapist to help me try to not respond and react to every little thing that I see and hear. And that's challenging for anybody in this day and age to have to deal with so much external stimulus. But at the end of the day, it comes back down to when you're a military veteran with schizophrenia, it's harder. And I have treatment-resistant schizophrenia, which means every medication I've ever tried for schizophrenia has either not worked or produced such side effects that they were untenable and I couldn't work while I was dealing with them. So, it's like you want to listen or you want to just sit here and make cracks and make judgment calls about somebody that you don't even know, and you're not even here to listen to them. It's such a waste of your time, and all you're doing is feeding the engagement meter for me and giving me more and more people's attention to the issue of when a military veteran gets on to speak about their experiences with mental health, and especially being a woman. And I don't know, you don't know how fat or lightweight I am, and none of that should really matter, because all of that only matters between my doctor and me. You don't know how much I weigh. You don't know what I look like underneath all of these clothes that I'm wearing right now. And it's none of your business. So at the end of the day, it's like, again, I'm here to talk about sexual assault. I'm here to talk about schizophrenia and violence. And I'm talking about the real, gritty, unfiltered truth about the world that I come from. And if you're not here to participate in that conversation, then leave. You don't belong here. Or you can keep hounding me. You can keep putting all your comments on, and the world can just see what a hateful, awful, bitter, terrible person that you are, that you would sit here and attack somebody who served their country honorably and has only ever served my community as a teacher, as an extracurricular activities coordinator, as a tutor. I've worked with kids with autism my whole life. That's who I am. That's not for anybody else to judge or criticize. And I don't have any problem sitting here all day long talking about my life with people and being real about it. But telling me that I need to put the fork down or telling me that I need to lose weight isn't going to solve my schizophrenia. Like, losing weight isn't going to make my schizophrenia go away. Losing weight isn't going to take away the years and years and years of complex trauma. It's not going to take away the memories of the 3 or 4 men who sexually assaulted me. Okay? Losing weight has nothing to do with trauma. So you can take that and shove it because it's completely useless information to be putting on this fucking bullshit. Yeah, you should apologize. You owe me an apology. I'm a human being. Well, once again, that wasn't my job. My job was to interpret French language for the military in AFRICOM. That was my job. So no, I didn't stop any foreign invaders. I went with the military as part of the military to do my job as I was assigned to do it. And when you're in the military intelligence field, you do exactly what you're told when to do it, and you don't get any more information than what's necessary. It's called compartmentalized intelligence. It means that need to know. So no, not necessarily, but even if I could, and even if I did and had, I couldn't talk about it because there are still joint service actions going on in AFRICOM to this day. There are still people's lives on the line. And I wouldn't do anything to knowingly, willfully endanger the people who are still serving over there. But that doesn't mean that I support everything that the military does. I'm not in the Army anymore. I'm out of the military. I don't even go to the VA for anything anymore because I don't trust the VA. I don't trust our government. I never have. And I'm never going to start now, especially not now, banning the word women. I mean, that's like ridiculous. We are women. I am a woman, and you're not going to stop me from telling the world that there's still too many people out there who are treating us like our stories don't matter. And I came out here on YouTube to say that I'm the only one that I know of that is out here who has schizophrenia, who writes and reads and functions the way that I do, who is trying to share that message with the world. That there are people with schizophrenia who are out here working. There are people out here with schizophrenia who are living healthy, safe, happy, safe lives, not hurting anybody. And that's what this was about. This wasn't about me having to defend myself having served in the military. I was 17 when I joined the service. I was extremely ignorant and naive to think that the military does anything but really destroy things around the world. And it's no one's business what I did in the military. I can't talk about the actions that I participated in if I even participated in them. I couldn't talk to you about it because of OPSEC. It's called operational security, and I wish our Secretary of Defense had a clue as to what that means. Because had I done what they're doing, if I had done what they're doing with that signal chat, I would have been court-martialed. That's treason. That's treasonous. It's ridiculous. And so, yeah, I'm just here to just tell my story about how I grew up in this sheltered existence. I thought I was doing the right thing. I grew up with Star Trek. I thought I was joining the military to, keep peace around the world. And then I was going to come back and I was going to be a teacher. And then I was going to retire and join the FBI as a linguist. And I was just going to help fight crime and be like the next Dana Scully, the next Catherine Janeway. Because again, like I said, having been homeschooled and being sheltered, all I had was like Star Trek, Schoolhouse Rock, and Julie Andrews growing up. And that was my life. So yeah, when people said, oh, the military will give you money for college, my family didn't have money for college. So I joined the military at 17. My parents were like not thrilled, but they were divorced. And so I had to have both of my parents' signatures. And when I took my plan for my life, they said, okay, go ahead. But by the time I was 16 and 17, I'd already been homeless. We'd already been exposed to domestic violence. I'd already been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. And I had my first job at 16. So I was trying to function and be like that honors AP student. And I couldn't think of any other way to get money for college. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to join the Army. It's something I had written down on my journal, when I was 10, join the Army, join the FBI, be a teacher. Those were the things I was going to do. And I did that. I did that for the most part. I just didn't join the FBI, obviously. And I wouldn't now. And it's just, that's what this is all about. It's just trying to explain to people, like, I'm not on trial. Why am I on trial? I am one person This happened to me. And it's no different than any other neurological condition like MS or Parkinson's or cancers that affect the way a person thinks. Schizophrenia has to do with the split mind. And like I said, 9 out of 10 of us have a history of childhood trauma. So the people you're looking at have been through something. And it's not just drugs. It's not a Ouija board. It's not because, I don't know. It's just not because of any of the myths out there that we constantly hear and that the media perpetuates. And that's what I came here to talk about, is what I'm trying to do out here is trying to write movies, books, and stories from a schizophrenic perspective that are telling an accurate representation or portrayal of the illness, and not what we see in the movies like Split or Donnie Darko or even A Beautiful Mind. Because even though A Beautiful Mind was probably the only movie I can think of about a man with schizophrenia at all, who was actually telling his real life story, and it wasn't some trope or plot device in a horror movie. I'm a filmmaker. I've been a filmmaker since I went to film school and wrote a film about becoming a teacher with schizophrenia. And I didn't even go to my screening. I wasn't even there. My actors told me, hey, there was a standing ovation. We wish you had been there to see it. And I was like, oh, well, sorry. It's my schizophrenia. Like, I couldn't be there, and not being able to be there for people I love is the hardest part of it, because it's not easy to be around people when their faces are caving into their skulls and their eyes are popping out, or there's blood pooling around their lips, or there's any number of things that are going on. And I spent the last 15 years not talking about this and not telling people what I see and what I'm hearing and what I'm smelling and what I'm touching and what I'm tasting. And so for me to actually sit here and do the absolute opposite of everything that I've ever been trained to do about schizophrenia, I've been told not to talk about it. Every time I come out here, I put myself at risk that somebody will figure out that I have schizophrenia and that they'll think this about me or think that about me, because again, the media portrayals of schizophrenia make us out to be all violent psychos. And you have to understand that psychopathy is not the same thing as psychosis. Pregnant women have sometimes can get psychosis after having babies. Like, it's called postpartum psychosis. That's actually a lot more common than everybody really ever talks about. And, we need to address those things. Like, psychosis actually affects more people in society than we would like to admit, and the way that schizophrenia has affected my memory and my ability to articulate and relate to other people, it's been a challenge trying to find my way back to who I was before I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So I was here to try to connect with people and try to find other veterans with schizophrenia who are struggling or who have made it into recovery. Like I have. I've made it to a certain amount of recovery, even though I'm struggling now. Like right now, I don't have medication. My psychiatrist had actually prescribed ketamine to help with it, but it doesn't help all the time, and it doesn't help a lot. And like, your body builds a tolerance anyway. So there's no easy answer to any of this. But the only answer I can say that doesn't work for me is, well, just lose weight, or, just get a job. I have a job. If you knew me, you would know that. I guess I'll put my Social Security earnings statement up so y'all can see that, like, proof that this schizo actually has been working pretty much my whole life. And it's when I'm not working that I lose my insurance, because my illness flares up and I have psychotic breaks and I have a hard time seeing the road clearly when I'm driving. The world becomes wobbly and wavy, and I can't concentrate, and I feel like I'm sinking into the ground. Or I'll be hearing things calling out my name, and it distracts me, and it's very difficult to drive and maintain concentration when you're seeing things that are disturbing to you. When you're seeing anything, if you imagine just driving on the freeway to work, imagine you're behind the wheel and all of a sudden you see another car coming out of the blue toward you, only to find out that it was just a hallucination. Too little, too late. It only takes a split second to veer your car off the road. I'm so lucky that I haven't actually crashed my car. I actually did total my car. I totaled my car last year, backing out of I work at the Space Needle. And I worked as a safety officer, and I was coming in for the graveyard shift, and I backed my car into the freaking bollards in the valet accident, because there was a car behind me, but I thought there were 2 cars, and I got spooked because of the movement of the car was so fast, and I slammed on my brake, but I hit the gas instead, and I ran into the bollard, and I fucked up my my whole stuff. And it's like, there's no so there's no way for me to, like, just say easily that schizophrenia is easy to live with. And there is no government check, government assisted living check on any of this. Like there's um, none of that. So I don't know what you're talking about, but okay. It's just, that's just not how it works. You know, that's just not how it works. If they believe that you can push a button, then you can work. So I work. I've worked my whole life. And I'm sick and tired of people saying, well, get a job. I actually literally have worked my whole life. And I'm just about to start a brand new job right now. And I'm teaching part-time as it is. But again, when you have treatment-resistant schizophrenia, if you had 12 people yelling at you all day about what a piece of shit you are and how you want to be, you know, they want to rape you with knives, I'm pretty sure it would put you off of wanting to be outside around people. It would make it very difficult for you to focus. Imagine putting on a pair of headphones with 12 or 50 different audio tracks going at one time. And depending on your stress levels and where you are in space and time, that can get really, really, really loud, and it can get really, really disorienting. And it's very difficult to live with. So that's what this is about, was just trying to explain like what the lived experience has been like for me, so that you could understand people you see in the street better. Because those people, many of those people are also comorbidly dealing with substance abuse, and alcohol can really definitely mess that person up, just alcohol alone. And I know those people, I see those people on the street. I'm like, I easily was them at one point and could have easily gone back to that stage had I not had any support or treatment. And at least I had somebody around who was like my best friend, who said, hey, I think you should really go and see if you can talk to somebody. And that's how I ended up with the diagnosis and having PTSD and all of that. Just, it all combined. It's a confluence of events. It's just a lot of stress and trauma. And once again, I will bang the clarion call until I die that these statistics are coming out about schizophrenia and what they're starting to believe are the causes of it. A lot of it has to do with, of course, your genes, and it was in my family already. So there was a chance that I might develop it. But as I got older, I always had sort of a nervous, like a more anxious and introverted nature out around people. I was very lively and animated at home, but I was very, very closed off to new people outside of my home. And I had the worst separation anxiety that my mom said that she's ever seen in a child, her entire career as an early childhood educator. And so, yeah, it's just a matter of trying to balance out like when and where things kind of went haywire and how can we fix it. But it's just trying to get a sense of what is happening to this person. Is it PTSD from the military? Is it, you know, what was going on? And, so yeah, it's just not as simple as like losing weight. Of course, I've been battling my weight my whole life. I was in the military and my knees were shot. I have bursitis in both of my knees from just doing PT, you know, PT. I had some freaking high speed platoon sergeants and squad leaders, and I had double dippers. Some of the people I served with were like double dipper Marines, and so they worked you hard. We ran like twice a day, and beginning morning and at night, and my knees are just pretty much shot from it. So it's losing weight helps. It definitely helps my knees, but it's not the same as being able to keep it off, especially when you are coming and going out of work, because you're having a difficult time mentally being able to keep a hold of the real world around you while you're being swarmed with voices and, like I said, decapitated heads. And a lot of the stuff that I see is pretty disturbing. And I've had to spend the last 15 years on and off with therapy to try to learn how to ignore it and not react to every single thing that I saw and heard. There's a certain point where after 15 years of living with schizophrenia, you're sort of like used to it. But at the same time, there are always new stimuli. And whenever I'm in a new or different or unusual or crowded situation, that's when it's worse. It's worse. And I'm constantly doing this because they're right here. There's like this guy that just sits like right here behind my ear and just goes at me all day long. Just from the moment that I open my eyes in the morning and I have some awareness of my surroundings, there's somebody there telling me to, like, kill myself and, and all of that. And I'm not going to, because if I do, then they win and you win. And all the people who want people like me to disappear from this planet because you don't know how to deal with us and we make you uncomfortable, I guess that would really solve all your problems if I just did that, wouldn't it? But that's not who I am. And I don't want to end my life. There's so much life to still live, so many places to go, and so much connection to make with people. And I came back from the military so that I could be that person to try to help bridge connections between people like me and the rest of the world who just doesn't understand us and doesn't want to understand us. I'm not going to give up loving people. I'm not going to give up who I am at the core of myself to this illness, not as long as I can help it. And every time I feel myself drifting away from that core self, the person I was before my schizophrenia, when people can see me drifting away and kind of getting sucked into my psychosis, that's not easy for them to watch. And I don't want to hurt people I love. I want to love the people I love and be there for them just as much as they've been there for me. And that's what it means to me. So I started this whole live stream is just about trying to help people understand schizophrenia better, and also having the chance to really engage with stories, books, and movies and music that's actually written by somebody who has the illness and can speak from lived experience and is not here to just like make cool, edgy art. I don't know. Somebody actually told me that. They introduced me to a movie project they were working on. They said it's about this girl who hears voices, a voice telling her to kill this pop star and take over the pop star's life. And I was like, oh, okay, so what's that all about? And she was like, well, oh my, something, I just want to make cool art. And I was just like, oh, well. Then she went on to tell me that her father or her grandfather or somebody she knew like died in an insane asylum, and that she knows like John Nash's like attorney or something, or somebody in her family. Anyway, she had a personal connection with somebody in her family with schizophrenia, and she still decided that this is what she was going to do, is write a story about a woman who hears a voice telling her to kill a pop star so she can take over her life. And I'm like, I've never met a schizophrenic person who has thoughts or voices like that, but I've not met every single schizophrenic person in the world. So when I asked her, I was like, is that something that really happened to you or your life and your family? She's like, no, I just thought it'd be cool. I was like, so you're okay with sending out a message that schizophrenic people are inherently automatically violent in every single situation and circumstance, and that all of our voices are always telling us to kill people? And that's not true. It's just not true. And I'm not going to bullshit it. I'm not going to filter it for you. I'm not going to pretend like it's like that violence never happens with people with schizophrenia. It does. I have been violent. Especially when I was under the influence of alcohol to the point where I have no memory of what happened, like en bloc, what's called an en bloc blackout. Happens to anybody and everybody who drinks too much alcohol and can't remember what they did. Well, that happens to me, but with psychosis and trauma, I was started to relive and flash back to all kinds of trauma all at once. It was like being in a state of quantum flux, where you were experiencing your entire life in one moment, and I just started fighting the entire world, but I had no memory of this. And so, yeah, it's awful because I live with the shame of I've hurt people I love. I've hurt people, and I don't want to hurt people. The last thing I ever wanted to do was ever hurt anybody I love or anybody in this world. I only ever set out to love people and to be the person I was raised to be, and to be a helper. And that's it. That's all there is to it. So thanks for, being here, and, thanks for challenging me to like really think about what I've done in my life and what I've been through. You challenged me to really stand up for myself and advocate for myself and say enough of people taking advantage of me, and enough people exploiting my story and turning me into a monster for profit in this industry. As a filmmaker, I've been in the industry, like I said, as a filmmaker since 2012. And before that, I was a theater person. And before that, I was always involved in the arts. And so I've always been an artist, and I'm never going to stop being an artist and telling this story. It's too important that people understand that not all people, that schizophrenia is a spectrum disorder. Like almost any other disorder, that there are people who live with an extreme form of this that never get help, and they are the ones who usually we'll see in the street, because they fall into substances to cope with their voices, and they don't have any other way out. Once you lose your home, like what point is there of even going back to the system of trying to get back into it, trying to get qualified for an apartment ever again? I don't even know. Most of these people don't even have their social security cards anymore. They've lost them. And so it's just, I'm lucky I'm not that bad anymore, but I was almost that bad at the prodromal early stages of this. And if I hadn't gotten help, and if I hadn't recognized what was happening to me because of my family's history, I wouldn't have gone to the hospital, and I could have easily have ended up in the street. And I've been homeless, but I've been lucky that it wasn't for very long. So anyway, but thanks for being here. Thanks for engaging. Yeah, like I said, like if you're gonna be here, like be productive and be kind, be respectful. I spend my time on the internet trying to be conscious about how I interact with people. What energy you put out there is gonna come back to you. I guarantee it. But that wraps it up for me. If you want to hang out with me next Friday again, I'm going to be talking specifically about a few different things, especially Cotard's delusion. I didn't get a chance to talk to it tonight because I got kind of waylaid by some snarky comments, but that's okay. No worries. I'm going to clap back, of course. Like, I'm not going to let people sit here and try to bully me. I can't be bullied anymore. You can't bully me anymore. I won't be bullied. But thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. I will see you guys next Friday at 7 p.m. And when I get my new work schedule, because like I said, I do work. When I get my work schedule for my new job, I will let you guys know when I'm switching my lives for. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night and have a great weekend.